Welcome back to the 4A Baseball Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. You just heard some Dodgers and Padres talk yesterday, but today we're heading to the middle of the American League East, arguably the most competitive division in all of baseball. There's four teams that could really be vying for that division title. And today we're going to be talking about the third and fourth seed from last year, the Tampa Bay Rays and Baltimore Orioles, two very analytically driven organizations, and an Orioles team that just came absolutely out of left field. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good. I'm ready to talk about these two teams. These are two teams that should be playoff contenders. I'm just curious where you guys have them this year. Steps, how we doing?
I'm excited to talk about both these teams. I love the Orioles. I think they're definitely a very interesting team to talk about, especially when you talk about all these young guys that they do have. And I'm excited to see where your heads are on these two teams as well.
Yeah, so we're going to kick it off with the Orioles today, who went 83 and 79, which when you look at it from an outside perspective, it's a okay season. It's slightly above 500. But when you take into account where the Orioles have been over the past 4 or 5 seasons, where they put up a 47-115 season not too long ago in 2021, when they were really just not that good, they were 52 and 110. They made a 31 game leap. That's a huge improvement for any team, but especially this Orioles team. Adley Rutschman had a huge breakout, and correlating with his breakout, they played playoff baseball the rest of the season. With that, their bullpen was also very good.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot to be excited about. I mean, this team kind of came out of left field, like Brad mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of young talent on this team. I mean, we'll get into the offseason moves that they had. But in my personal opinion, I'm not sure if it's going to be enough for them to make that next step, especially considering how many teams are fighting for a playoff spot, even in this division. Brad, you want to walk us through the offseason?
Well, before I talk about the offseason, I just want to preface this by this season doesn't need to be a playoff season for this season to be a success. It needs to be the young guys come up and play like Rushman plays like he did last year. A couple guys we're going to talk about later, Henderson and Rodriguez, they play and they develop and they just get at bats and innings. Like you need that this season. This doesn't need to be the playoff push. That's for next year. Because this offseason, they didn't make that playoff push. Who they lose? They lost Jordan Lyles. He went to the Royals. He ate a lot of innings. That's about it. Rougned Odor went to the Padres. He was a really big leader in the clubhouse, not much of a producer in any way, but he said that on the Padres now he's the one that'll take the punches from the Dodgers, so Machado will be okay. And then they got Jesus Aguilar in the middle of the season. He's now an Athletic. And coming in, however, they got Adam Frazier, which Tom, what do you think about that?
I mean, he's a contact bet. If you can get him to kind of revert back to his 2021 form, I think that was his good season. Um, Ever since he got traded to the Padres from the Mariners, he was not looking the same. I'm not sure if that's or was it no, not the Mariners to the Padres, the Pirates to the Mariners, or something
It
along
was the Pirates, the
Padres.
Padres. He was on the
Yeah, that's
Mariners
correct.
last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ever since that trade took place, he has not looked good. And there's just a couple steps that need to be made. Fortunately, he's in the hands of the Orioles, who are very analytically driven. So hopefully they can, fix his mechanics around. Hopefully get something going. I mean, it's a worst case scenario. It is a 1 year deal, and they're not paying him crazy amount of money. So you hope to get some production out of him. Maybe flip him at the deadline. I'm not sure what this team's plan is because they did sell a little bit at the deadline last season. But I think it's a good move. I think it's just a lack of depth in this offseason. There's only a couple moves to go over.
Yeah, and at the trade deadline last year, as Tom mentioned, they traded away Jorge Lopez, who was looking like a top five reliever in baseball at the time. He went to the Twins. He didn't really succeed to the degree that the Twins had hoped they would. But it opened the door for Felix Bautista, who by Stuff Plus was the best reliever in baseball last year. The mountain among men. He literally looks like a mountain. I think that is his nickname. And it he kind of shores up what's actually a pretty decent bullpen. They reassured that bullpen by getting Michael Givens, 1 year, $5 million. They brought him back from a couple seasons ago. Michael Givens, solid reliever, not going to blow you away, but you know what? The Orioles might blow him away. They got James McCann and cash from the New York Mets for a player to be named later. Cool. He got Adley Rutschman got a backup, and they got to pay a fourth of his contract. So I'm fine with that. You guys?
I mean,
I
it's just depth, and I mean, James McCann was a very good offensive player 3 seasons ago, I believe, on the White Sox. He just has not looked like that in a while. I hope they can help him out a little bit.
I think it's gonna be good to give Rushman those rests and maybe have him play DH a couple days. So that way it's not putting as much stress on his knees and stuff like that.
Yeah, and their last move was actually a trade that I found quite interesting. They acquired Cole Irvin and Kyle Verbisky from the Oakland Athletics for Daryl Hernandez, excuse me. I really like this move. I think Cole Irvin's always had a ceiling. We've always seen flashes of his success, and I think the Orioles might be the team to actually like to gather it. But it's also an Athletics being a poverty franchise and trading away yet another good player.
Yeah, I mean, when you expect like these big offseason moves, I mean, people at the beginning of the offseason were talking about Carlos Correa, Xander Bogaerts, these big names going to the Orioles, and you come back with these guys. I mean, there was even good free agent pitching on the market too. And I mean, coming back with Cole Irvin is a little bit, and Kyle Gibson is a little underwhelming coming from an organization that a lot of people thought were going to buy. Brad, I know the plan is to just let the rookies play a little bit, but I think we are approaching the point where they should be trying to contend. And obviously, we did not see that drive from the management this offseason.
Um, I think it was a better move. I don't know if it was a better move, but I think it wasn't the worst decision for them to hold off. I think especially since they struck out with all the pitching, if they went out and got like a Rodon, I think probably would have been a good idea to kind of push a little harder for one of those highly touted shortstops. But they kind of struck out in the pitching department, so I think, um, with Kyle Gibson being the kind of their like flash best pitcher that they got. I think it's better to hold off, see how those young guys do develop this year. And if you guys still are around or like maybe pushing the playoffs or wild card or something, maybe look at a trade deadline deal or try and get Aaron Nola or Julio Urias next offseason.
Yeah, I've been sticking with the idea of them getting Aaron Nola for a while now.
I would like
I
that.
Yeah, and they have the money to do it. They're one of the lowest payrolls in baseball this year, and here we are talking up this team, right? Like a bunch of young guys, low payroll, not really any veterans under contract anymore. They got rid of Chris Davis. I think they still have to pay him, but I think it's kind of like it's a good thing they're paying him to not be on their team. Um,
Yeah.
I like where the Orioles are at right now. They just really need to at least maintain where they were last year. And are they going to do that with this rotation?
I mean, I think they will. I mean, you got Kyle Gibson, you got Cole Irvin, you got Kyle Bradish, Dean Creamer, and Grayson Rodriguez. Oh, Brad, did I miss
Dean Kramer.
Kramer? I like the Creamer. Okay. And then you got John Means on the IL right now. He obviously shown flashes of potential. I'm not sure the timetable for that injury, but it should be before. Is it before the All-Star break, correct?
Oh
Or
yeah,
am I wrong?
before.
Yeah. So that is not a bad starting rotation with considering everything, but it's not a rotation that you would say is dominant. You kind of hope that everyone can stay healthy for a full season. I know Grayson Rodriguez dealt with some injuries in the minors last season. John Means has been off the field quite a bit in the last 3 seasons. Those two guys are the guys I'm most worried about in this rotation. These other guys are more like role players. There's not a standout, ace in this rotation.
I think the real X factors for this rotation are gonna be Rodriguez, Kramer, and Irvin. We need to see how the Orioles can turn Irvin if they can get the upside that they want out of him. And then Kramer, we kind of need to see him bring it actually for a full season. And then Rodriguez, we need to see him, be healthy and actually be on the field and produce at a high level like we think he can.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about Kyle Bradish just for a minute. Like he was horrible to start the year last year. He entered the month of June or finished the month of June with a 7.38 ERA. He got sent down to the minor leagues for over a month. And when he came back up for uh his last 13 starts of the season, he posted a 3.6 ERA, which isn't by any means like a great thing. When you're going from a 7.3 to a 3.6, something went right in his minor league development, and he could be a solid 3 or 4 piece in this rotation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've talked about him a lot. Grayson Rodriguez has the potential to become an ace. I mean, he has all the tools necessary. Just kind of has to prove it at the major league level. He's only gotten a couple innings at the major league level, correct?
No, he hasn't had
None.
any. No,
I thought he got a chance to pitch at the end. Oh
No,
no,
he
he
was
got
hurt.
injured.
He was hurt at
Yeah,
the
that's
end of
right.
last season, so they didn't pull him up.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm checking to see how he's doing in spring training right now. I know it was a little bit rough. Um, Grayson Rodriguez this spring, he has thrown 7 2/3 innings. He's struck out 11 batters. He's walked 5 though. We don't like the walks.
Yeah. I mean, he is a power pitcher, so the walks might be a little higher. I'm not too worried about it. I'm more worried about his health. He's got the stuff, as Brad mentioned, so if he's on the field, he'll be all right.
What was the injury last year? Was it?
A
It was
grade
something.
2 lat strain.
Yeah.
He should be fine. But let's head over to this bullpen. So they got Felix Bautista, of course. Sinel Perez, Michael Givens, Keegan Akin, Brian Baker, Tyler Wells, Andrew Pilati, and Austin Voth, and then Dylan Tate's injured. What do we see from this bullpen outside of like obviously Michael Bautista?
Michael Bautista. Steph?
Felix, what? I read two different names. I'm sorry. Felix Bautista.
Right, go ahead.
I think it's a top 10 bullpen in baseball, and I will stand by that. You've got Keegan Akin,
I don't hate it.
who's a good middle relief pitcher, can eat a couple innings. I'm surprised they don't have DL Hall on here, in all honesty. He was up last year. I could see him in a 1 or 2 inning relief spot. I don't think he's going to be much of a starter. Dylan Tate, Felix Bautista, Ciano Perez, both are all three of them very, very good last year. Michael Givens is a quality reliever. I really like this bullpen.
Yeah, honestly, if you had like made all these guys free agents, I'm not sure which teams would target these guys. They just seem to like they don't. There's not really like a standout guy other than Bautista. They all just seem to function pretty well in this bullpen. I don't know. It's not. It's scrappy to me because a lot of these guys' names you just started to know last season, and they're all just coming on the scene now. And Brad, I do agree with you. DL Hall should be in this bullpen. I believe he will be, right? Let me double check.
This is from Fangraphs, the list I have on this document, but he's not on it right now. And then they have Austin Voth, who on the Nationals, Steves, you can attest to it, wasn't very good.
Terrible. He had a rocky outing in spring training. He had a rocky couple outings, so
it's spring training.
And maybe he's just ironing out a couple things, but he was atrocious on the Nationals.
And he gets DFA'd, he gets sent to the Orioles. And in 22 starts, he's fantastic. He posts a sub-3 ERA. It's just flip of the switch on the Orioles, and he starts succeeding.
And that's what happens when you have an analytically driven team and good coaching behind you.
Yeah, and they used him as a starter as well. So, a worst-case scenario, one of these starters go down, you have Austin Voth right there to take over.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is more of a Cinderella run more than anything, but it could be something analytically driven that fixed him. I mean, he is coming from the Washington Nationals who do not have bottom five analytic team, and also Jim Hickey, worst pitching coach in baseball. So it's like you're not going to get much out of him. But I think the Orioles are doing their best to maximize him. I think this is probably the peak version of him, though. It's not going to be like this Cy Young like dominant guy, but this is a guy that can fit in that 5 spot in the rotation and be pretty effective.
I agree. I like it. I think this bullpen's really solid, and I don't hate the pitching. I wish there was someone else, though, in that starting rotation.
I definitely agree with that. Another guy that you could rely on would definitely be very, very attractive, which is why I think if they are somewhat competitive at the deadline, going out and maybe trading a couple of your top prospects to get like a Corbin Burns type guy might not be the worst idea in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, let's re-look at history here. The Orioles rebuild is going very similarly to the Astros rebuild and how it kind of functioned. And it seems like every step of the way has been very similar to this Astros rebuild. The only thing is, in the season the season that they were contending? Yeah, the season that they were contending, they went out and got Justin Verlander, and that was really the difference maker for this team. And that was what drove them to win a World Series and become one of the best teams in baseball. So, and I think that's the missing piece for this Orioles team is maybe a really aggressive trade deadline, acquiring some starting pitching, someone to step up in this bullpen, this rotation. That's the step that drove the Astros to World Series contention, and it will be the same for the Orioles.
Yeah, so you make that Astros comp. Sorry, Sebs, you go real quick, then I'll make the.
You good. I mean, a 1-2 punch of Grayson Rodriguez and like a Corbin Burns type player would absolutely go crazy. Not to mention having guys like Kyle Gibson, Cole Irvin, and John Means to take out those last 3 spots. Like that's a solid rotation. It's probably a top 15 in baseball if you look at it like that. So I definitely think I think it's in the best interest of the Orioles to look and shop maybe like a Jackson Holiday type player to get a Corbin Burns.
I don't think you can deal Jackson Holiday, but
Not yet. Go ahead, Brad.
with the Astros rebuild, and we'll move on to the lineup. They had 3 seasons of 56 or less wins. Then they had a 70 and 92 season. Then they jumped to 86 and 76. I feel like we're kind of in between those two records right now. And then the Astros in 2016 kind of regressed just a little bit. Maybe we're there right now. And then in 2017, they went out and won the World Series. So if their GM, which came from that Astros team,
Yeah.
is following the same format, put some money on the Orioles winning in 24 or 25.
That's exactly what
So,
I'm saying.
yes.
We're right there. Steph, go
Stas,
ahead.
what's that lineup?
All right, so you got Cedric Mullins leading off in center field, Adley Rushman behind the dish. Gunnar Henderson's going to be over at third base, Anthony Santander in right field, Ryan Mountcastle at first base, Kyle Stowers at DH, Austin Hayes in left, Adam Frazier at second, and Jorge Mateo at shortstop. Your bench takes up James McCann, Ramon Urias, Taryn Vavra, and Ryan McKinnon.
It's a solid lineup. I mean, there's a moment of silence as we kind of process this. It's a very solid lineup. It's I'm not sure. I think a lot of us are relying on this future. You got younger guys on this team that, haven't shown this for a whole season, but there's a lot of potential in this lineup to be one of the best in baseball. And not only that, they can also field pretty well. I mean, everyone in this lineup is on the better side of the defense, other than Anthony Santander. Everyone's on the better side defensively. So it's a pretty complete team. Cedric can steal you 30 bags too.
And Santander definitely makes up for his lack of defense on both sides of the offensive ball. So I definitely think I think Santander is very good. And if they aren't succeeding, maybe shopping him at the deadline might be a good idea to get more prospects. But I don't think they would do that. What team is he on in the World Baseball Classic? Because
Venezuela.
Venezuela.
he was raking for them as well. I mean, outside of that, you got Ryan Mountcastle. I think he's a guy that like kind of could have a bounce back type season this year. Cedric Mullins is always going to come and bring it every single day. Adley Rushman again is their franchise cornerstone, and we need to see what Gunnar Henderson can do. Past that, I mean, Austin Hayes does what he does best. Need a bounce back from Adam Frazier. Jorge Mateo is very good, and then your DH is Kyle Stowers. What do you think about that, Brad?
I think he didn't really get many at bats last year, 98 at bats last year, and it's really not a good sample size to understand the guy. He hits the ball pretty hard. He really only hit against right-handed pitchers, so we don't know what he's like as a lefty against lefties. I think Austin Hayes has a lot of potential through the month of July, or before July began last year. He had a 753 OPS. Then he kind of just tailed off throughout the rest of the year. If he can maintain that an entire year, another more depth to that lineup. Right now, 1 through 5 is really solid. 6 and 7 can be. It has to be proven to us through Kyle Stowers. And then Frazier and Mateo. Mateo's not a bat. He's a glove, but that glove can provide value.
Yeah, I mean, they almost might be running into the same problem as the Dodgers. I mean, teams that have very good farm systems run into the issue of where can we slot in the young guys and where can we find the talent that's coming up? Where can we find room to put them? There's guys that we're going to talk about in a second that might have the chance to come up this season. And there's guys that even aren't on this list that I also want to talk about because there's so many prospects on this team, even more so than the Dodgers probably. This team has such a deep farm system. But first, we got to talk about the bench really quick. James McCann's coming off the bench. Ramon Urias, Taryn Vavra. I've never heard of that guy. And then you got Ryan McKenna. Oh,
Yeah.
said the bench?
Yeah,
shoot,
we're good though. You're good.
Okay,
No, it's fine.
okay.
It's fine. So James McCann, solid. Ramon Urias won a Gold Glove last year, and now he's a bench player.
Yep.
He's just not good enough bat.
No.
Not at all. I mean, I think Jorge Mateo is probably he's a little better offensively and does just as good a job out at shortstop. So, and then do you got anything on Taryn Vavra, Brad, or
Utility player, young kid, not great.
Okay.
Role player.
Hey,
every team needs role players.
every team needs a role player, and maybe he'll make a name for himself in Baltimore. And I think Tom's definitely gonna keep an eye on this kid. And then Ryan McKenna. Tom, what do you think about Ryan McKenna?
I mean, this is a spot that should probably be going to one of the younger guys. I mean, there's so many guys. Brad, just can we just go into the prospect central so I can just branch into all the guys that I wanted to talk about? Okay,
You
so
got it.
there's obviously the big guys in Grayson Rodriguez and Gunnar Henderson. Grayson Rodriguez, as we talked about, has the tools to be one of the best players in baseball, one of the best pitchers in baseball, averaging 97 on his fastball in spring training. And then before his injury in June of 2022, he allowed 48 base runners in 56 innings pitched. That is insane. That is dominance. And I mean, even if he's his injured self, he's still a middle of the line starter. It's just if he's healthy or not. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, a big factor for this guy. But the two guys I wanted to talk about really quick were not on this list for fan graphs coming up. It's Heston Kjerstad. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but it's a guy who went down with a heart condition last year and came back from this heart condition and is now raking in spring training. He was a pretty high prospect 2 years ago before his heart condition, and now he's destroying baseballs in spring training. Brad, do you think this is a guy that can make the starting roster if he continues like this?
No,
No,
he's never played above A ball.
no.
Yeah,
I think he could be something. I think he could be a September call up at best.
Yeah,
he's a never played
If
above A plus ball.
I mean,
2024 estimate. I
he
don't.
kind of Kerstad got kind of like he got pushed back because of that.
Pardon.
Injury.
Yeah, heart condition.
So yeah, heart condition. So I mean, he's a good story too. I mean, the Orioles always have good stories. I agree with Tom. I really like him. I could see maybe at best it's a late September call up,
I mean,
and I'm
yeah, and you
talking like
also,
like
yeah,
5-10 games max.
and then moving on to the guys that are starting in AAA would be Colton Cowser and Jordan Westbrook. Those two guys are also hitting pretty well at the AAA level. I'm just not sure if they're going to get the call at the beginning of the season, obviously, but they could be a midseason call up. Do you think that's something that they're going to start testing out midseason, Brad? Even if they're in contention?
It depends on how those guys are playing more so, because right now they're blocked by Mullins, Hayes, and Santander. That's a pretty significant group to be blocked by. I think the really only opportunity for a guy to come up and show off his bat would be if Kyle Stowers isn't doing much.
Yeah, I mean, there's also room off the bench, though. I mean, guys like Taron Vavra and Ryan McKenna could probably be replaced by these guys that deserve opportunity, especially if they're hitting as well as they were before in the minors.
You don't want to put prospects on the bench. You want to let them, if they're not going to play, you keep them in AAA.
Yeah, I just want to give the young guys a chance because, as we mentioned a million times, this is kind of their season to, test everything out. And there's so many
Yeah.
guys coming up that I don't know how they're going to do it.
It's kind of like you don't. It's like the NBA, right? If like a player's like good, right, but they're not quite good enough to crack the starting rotation or even really get significant minutes in the game, you kind of put them on the G League team so they can kind of ball out there, right? I'd rather my young player get at bats and get work against AAA talent than sit on the bench and get an at bat every week.
That's true.
All right. You guys ready to head over to predictions?
I think so. Tom, you want to start us off?
Oh yeah, let's go with my predictions. I feel like I probably rated them on a bit of the low. Actually, it's probably about the middle of the pack. I had them going 85 and 77. I feel like that almost is on the higher end for them. I feel like they might. We'll talk about their volatility in a little bit. I had their MVP being Adley Rutschman. Obviously best catcher in baseball second half of the season. I don't know if he continues that for a whole season, but if he does, he is definitely their MVP. The most important player is Grayson Rodriguez. We've already expressed our concern for his health. We hope we can make a whole season out of him. And if that is true, he probably will be a rookie of the year favorite. And there's a lot of rookie of the year favorites on this team. For their Cy Young, I also had Grayson Rodriguez because I'm betting on him to get the innings he needs to win the Cy Young for this team. And their breakout, I have three guys I want to talk about. Okay. There's the safe pick of Gunnar Henderson, but I don't want to pick him either. There's a Ryan Mountcastle, who might I add had like a -6 expected home runs to regular home runs. When they pushed that wall back in Baltimore, that screwed him over so badly. He hit so many balls to the warning track at Orioles at Camden Yards. It screwed him over so bad. And it just showed that he was statistically one of the most unlucky batters last season. And I really do think that he will improve drastically next season, whether that be in the power department or even getting on base more. But my pick is Anthony Santander because I think he will break out even further than he already has. I think he'll be like a dark horse MVP candidate. I think he might get some votes. He massively improved his strikeout rate, lowered his walk rate. The expected stats are less than his real stats. So, I mean, sorry, expected stats are higher than his real stats. So even in a season where he hit 30 home runs, still managed to have expected stats better. So I think he will continue to progress forward, and I think he'll become the star of this team and kind of break out amongst the other guys.
I actually like that pick. For me, I had them going 84 and 78. MVP Adley Rushman, Cy Young, Grayson Rodriguez. Breakout, I went with the safe pick, as Tom says, Gunnar Henderson. The most important I had as just like the young Bucks is in a whole, like Adley Rushman, Grayson Rodriguez, Gunnar Henderson. How will these guys perform, and will they show up to the expectations that we have for them?
I like it. I'm right there with Stevs at 84 and 78. Again, 84 and 78, it's one win more than last year, but it's still a good season as long as they get what they need. MVP Adley Rutschman. For Cy Young, Swervin Cole Irvin. I could see them fixing him and him being incredibly effective for this team. He's got a plus fastball. We've all heard about this like big sweeping curveball. What if it becomes a big sweeping slider? You know, the whole revolution that's been going on. I could see him fitting right into it. Breakout Grayson Rodriguez, and most important is Adley Rutschman.
I feel like that. I mean, we're all relatively in the same boat. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch this Orioles team. What do you have their ceiling as? What do you think the highest they can win?
86, 87 games.
Probably, Steves.
Yeah, I'd say 87 is about the most I could give them as a floor. I'm saying like I don't even like 75,
That's exactly where
70,
I would be.
somewhat
Yeah.
around
I
there.
was just gonna
Right on
say
track.
reverse the record.
Yeah.
Valid.
Yeah, and the volatility is like mid. It's not too far to one side, too far to the other. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. But again, like this team could kind of just like flounder and not really develop, and it'd still be a middle pack team, or it could take a good stride and be, a contending playoff team going for a 6 spot in that wild card.